Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be my sort of beginner's guide to Weiss Schwarz trading card game for Avatar fans. The reason I'm making this video is because, as you can see here, Avatar just in the last kind of few months has been confirmed to be getting a full set in the Weiss Schwarz trading card game. So there's not too much information out here about the Avatar set in particular. So this video will be more of an introduction to just, the way the game works on both sides of it, both from the collecting point of view. How does this game do rarities? What do the really fancy cards sort of look like? How difficult are they to get? Some information on that, as well as how to play, what the products are, all that sort of stuff. We'll be going over that here, but just be aware that there is very limited information on the Avatar set itself. So, for the most part, all there really is this image here, confirming that there is a set coming soon. Avatar The Last Airbender, Weiss Schwarz, English Edition Original. That's interesting. Most other Weiss Schwarz sets, as you can see here, are based on different animes, including some very popular ones, like Attack on Titan. They have Sword Art Online. You can see here Quintessential Quintuplets, and so on, Seven Deadly Sins, and there's a lot of other ones here as well. So Avatar feels a little bit kind of different. They have in the last few years expanded. They have a RWBY set that I think was like last year's kind of English original. I think before that they did Adventure Time. So they're beginning to expand more into sort of like more kind of Western properties. And Avatar is absolutely a big get for them. I think it's going to draw a lot of people into the game, and I think a lot of the Weiss Schwarz community, when they saw this announcement, were excited for it because they like Avatar, but also because they're aware a lot of people are suddenly going to become interested in the game because Avatar has a set. So that's that. Up here it does again confirm Avatar. You can see there's no link to anything specific on Avatar just yet. I think most people are predicting it'll be middle of the year next year, perhaps, where we properly see the release. So we're still maybe a few months off from finding out a lot about it. They did post about it on Twitter, so that was interesting. And if you go to this video, they covered the announcement stream, basically. And right at the end, they do announce Avatar. Again, it's just the image, basically, that they showed off, announcing Avatar. But right at the end, it says here on the release schedule, coming soon, Avatar The Last Airbender, and it confirms to us what products we're going to be getting. So Avatar is going to be getting a Trial Deck Plus, a booster pack, and a supply set. So a Trial Deck Plus is basically just Weiss Schwarz's version of a starter deck. The reason it says plus when other ones like this one for Dragon Maid says no plus is basically just it's their kind of new style of doing trial decks, where it's a little bit more sort of reasonable, in a way, kind of like fair to the player, where in the past, I think the way they would often do it is that there would be certain cards where you only get one copy of. So if you wanted a playset of that card, you'd have to buy 4 trial decks or buy 3 copies of the single from the trial deck. With Trial Deck Pluses, every card either comes 4 of in the trial deck or 2 of if it's one of the more kind of fancy cards. So they've made it so that to get the most out of all the trial deck cards, you only ever need to buy 2. That way you have 4 copies of every card that comes in the trial deck. It's also, I think, made to be a little bit more playable and resemble a competitive deck without quite being at that level, but it's more representative of what those decks are actually like. If you played any trading card game before, you'll probably know this, that, starter decks are good for learning the game, but not good for learning how to play the game well. So treat Plus as maybe being kind of structure deck-esque rather than full-on starter deck, but it will still have mostly relatively easy to understand cards, and just flowing a little bit better in terms of the gameplay. Booster pack, self-explanatory. Every trading card game does this. We're going to be getting a set. I assume they'll do it in a very similar way to all of their other sets, where it'll be, for the most part, a 100 card set, and they'll have the rarities and stuff like that be the exact same. But we'll get into more information on that later on. Supply set is interesting. This one probably requires a little bit of explanation here. So here is the Attack on Titan Final Season trial deck. So I think this is the most supply set. This is the most recent supply set that's come out. So it probably tells us what they're going to do. So one of these, what it is, it's a package that comes with, you get a deck case or deck box, as you can see here, based off that property. So in this case, Attack on Titan. For Avatar, it's going to be an Avatar one, so you can expect to probably see Aang on it and look very, very nice. You can see here, you're going to get some card sleeves here as well, with a design on it. 5 booster packs. These are just standard booster packs. You just happen to get 5 of them here. And then very interestingly, you will get 4 of 10 types of exclusive promo cards, PR cards. You can see here, of the 4, 3 of them will be normal, 1 will be foil. So if you want all 10 in foil, you're going to have to buy a lot of supply sets or buy some singles. Either way, if you want every individual card, you're going to need to get multiple of these. So you can see here, the deck case, there's the dimensions. It's a pack of 60 sleeves, 5 packs, 4 cards. And so the idea here is that, okay, you know, you're probably going to want to buy maybe a couple of these or something like that. But still, cool that it's getting the full kind of treatment of, like, Attack on Titan is the only other one on the release schedule here that actually has both of these things as well. Trial deck and supply set, in addition to the booster pack. So that's most everything that we know about the Avatar set. I don't think I can talk too much more about what I think it will be until you guys actually have a foundation in terms of what Weiss Schwarz actually is as a card game. So I'll just do, in the next little segment of the video, a quick history on Avatar with trading cards / trading card games, and then we'll get into collecting, rarities, and how to play the game itself. Okay, so let's go over a brief history of Avatar with, like, trading cards. In recent times, we just get stuff like, you know, like this, that, like, say, come with, like, action figures, statues, stuff like that. So, like, these chibi figures came with these collectible cards. Other different brands did stuff like this as well. There are games that have come out that have, like, you know, cards associated with how you play those board games. In terms of more collectible stuff, Topps did do a limited run set about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, where it's pretty nice. It's using some of the relatively new stock art for most of the cards. It was only a set of about 20 different character cards. You can see their cards are nice, but relatively basic. Nothing much going on here. You had to buy out kind of 1 pack at a time. It was limited, so the packs were somewhat pricey. But the main collectible aspect here was that every pack came with effectively a unique numbered card. And this was going to be the collectible, the value aspect of this. These are the commons that have this sort of kind of tan colored border. But every character came as like a blue border, red border, green border, white border, black border, and elemental border. And the idea is that, say, May, there was, say, 50 blue border Mays, all numbered. There was, say, 25 red borders. In my case, I got a white border Suki, and I got number 2 of 10. So this is actually a relatively rare one, in that the only rarity above this would be black border Suki, which there's only 5 of, and I think elemental rarity Suki, which there's only 1 of. So, you know, there was an aspect to this that was kind of nice. It sold out straight away, showed you that the Avatar fandom is interested in this sort of stuff, but nothing really came of it over the last couple of years. Then you have to go back all the way to right at the start, basically, of the fandom. So 2005, 2006, we got this game here. Actually, a full-on TCG, Avatar trading card game. This is the Quick Strike trading card game. So just to show you one of these, Quick Strike, it's an upper deck game, highlighting in a way how old it is. Avatar only got 1 set back in basically 2006. There was a second set planned, but it got cancelled because I think the whole game effectively got cancelled. There was like a Pirates of the Caribbean Quick Strike set. It also, I don't think, did all that much. And I think basically what happened with this game was that with regards to the Avatar side of things, they merchandised Avatar quite heavily early on. So 2005, 2006, lots of merchandise. But they almost did too much before the fandom had fully like matured, found itself, and really established that this is like a mega popular franchise. And then basically right as the fandom is beginning to build up, they start trailing off with the amount of merchandise that they're doing. And so basically they completely miss. Right at the moment when the fandom hits its peak, they have very little merchandise. And so that's a very unfortunate thing that happened with Avatar. And then notably, with Korra, they basically didn't do like any merchandise from 2012 to 2014. Very minimal merchandise. And I think this trading card game is sort of a highlight of that. So many people in the fandom are unaware that this game even like exists, let alone anything else. I'm pretty sure my channel is sort of responsible for a large amount of fans actually knowing this game exists. But anyway, this game has 4 different types of cards in your actual deck itself. Most of your deck is going to be made up of these blue cards, the strike cards, which have a defense and attack value, have an effect, and a cost. So they're going to be what most of the action happens with. These are advantage cards. You're going to play a handful of these, but not too many. These are one-time use cards, also have a cost and an effect. They are used to charge your different zones, which I'll show off in just a second. Last card, which you probably play the least of, is the ally card. Again, they have a cost and an effect, but they are permanent cards. So if you play one of these in one of your zones, it stays in that zone unless a card gets rid of it. And then you build your deck around a character. So this is a chamber card, character chamber card, double-sided, and they open up, which is very interesting and unique, very cool. So you can see it is a strike card in here and on the other side, which is a very cool thing overall. So a brief idea of how this game actually works is as follows. So I believe the way you set up the game is that your character, I think, is there to represent your green zone. Your deck represents your yellow zone. And let's just put some cards in the discard pile here to represent the red zone. So you have 3 zones here. And the idea is you're defending going down the zone. First, second, third. If you can't defend in the 3rd zone, you take damage. And I think if you take 3 damage, you lose the game. So that's what happens here. Interestingly, no hand in this game. This game literally sort of in a way runs itself. Just so you can see it a little bit better, I'll just move this off to the side here. And the idea is that you literally just, on the first turn of the game, you are defending an attack of 3. You flip a card into the green zone and you see what happens. So you want to strike here. Defense of 5, that can handle an attack of 3. So you make a decision here. Do you want to pay the cost and basically counterattack, defend the attack, and now your opponent has to deal with defend against an attack of 6. So then they do the same thing, defending in their zone with 6, and you go back and forth until either you can't pay enough and you have to go down all your zones, or the number is just too big to deal with. And that's basically what happens here. So you obviously have a certain amount of energy. I think at the start of the game you have like 3 energy in like each zone or something like that. You kind of represent it like this. And the idea is like, oh, if I want to pay this, 2 green, 1 red to the discard pile to play this card. You get energy back by basically choosing to sort of not defend in a zone. So either if you can't, or just for tactics, you can be like, okay, can't defend here. Flip, it goes and becomes energy. So now I'm defending in this zone. This card, can't defend that, it becomes yellow energy. And then obviously the idea is as you take a point of damage, you basically get a red energy, which are quite rare. The ally cards, like I was saying, they just sort of remain permanent in a different zone, so you kind of want to get them in every zone. The advantage cards, when you play them, allows you to sort of charge your zone by putting the zone sideways. So it means it's sort of tricky to, for instance, charge your discard pile, the red zone down here. But if you do manage to charge all of the zones, this is what allows you to play the card in the middle. So there's some level of strategy, but most of the strategy is basically in your deck building to make sure you have the right blend of low-cost cards, high-cost cards, and so on. The problem was that obviously it was early on in Avatar. The game in general, I don't think was much of a success. So it never particularly took off, and that's why this game is the way it is. But there has been sort of, in a way, like a little bit of a resurgence. Just people interested in grabbing some of the product from this old TCG. And I think it highlights that the Avatar fandom is going to be all over the Weiss Schwarz card game set when it does come out. Just a minor interest in this one. And now, in 2022 going into 2023, with Avatar Studios, Avatar coming back with animated movies, shows and stuff like that, it's the perfect time for something like this to happen. So I think Weiss Schwarz have timed this release really nicely, and I think it's going to hit at a time when it's going to be a massive success. And I hope Weiss Schwarz fans and Avatar fans both enjoy the set. Because you can see there was potential with a game like this. It obviously didn't continue on all that much. Last thing I just want to show you is a little bit of kind of like, for instance, here's some of the other chamber cards. You can see some of the like different brand new characters that are only in this game. You can see them here. There's another side of them, which is quite interesting. And then here are some of the hollows. I only have 3 of them. They're called Xenomentals in this game. Pretty nice. I have the Iroh one, which is quite rare. And yeah, they're actually quite nice looking cards. But again, you need a lot of cards to build a deck around them. So yeah, next we'll move on to the Weiss Schwarz trading card game itself. Okay, so let's talk about Weiss Schwarz. Product, collectability, rarity, stuff like that. So obviously, first of all, we need to start off with the name of the game. Weiss Schwarz. It is a Japanese trading card game that has been ongoing since 2007. So it's actually a relatively old game that has been continuing all this time. It's a weird name. It just means white, black in German. So that's an interesting idea. The idea of it is that it's basically a card game system in that all of its sets are basically based around different IPs. So, for instance, there's going to be an Avatar set, of course. There's been Attack on Titan. There still is Attack on Titan. This set is It Wrong to Try and Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon, aka Danmachi. We've got Sword Art Online here, and so many others if you look through the list of different ones they have. They have like a ReZero set, Tokyo Revengers is it? That one just came out, Quintessential Quintuplets, lots and lots of different properties. So the idea is not that you mix and match across animes, but instead you build your deck from the cards within that anime set to fight other animes. That's how you actually go about doing it. The cards are kind of designed in a way where they mainly interact with other cards from its own franchise. So that's the way it works. So yeah, very quickly to just get across the idea of the cards and how they look and stuff like that. Let's just go through, grab a couple of them here. So there are 3 types of cards in the game. Here they are. So the first one should obviously be this. First of all, you have a character card. Obviously the idea, it's an anime card game, and they very much play on that idea. They call the board, the field, the stage, and you obviously put characters on the stage to fight and do effects and so on. And what designates them as a character is, of course, that they have an attack value. That's the main thing. That is the kind of, that shows you that. Otherwise, you can see they have a level, a cost, a trigger icon that might be empty, might have something in it, an effect, the, of course, attack value, and a thing called a soul value, which is how much damage this card will do when it actually participates in a fight. Name, and you also have these tags here in sort of yellow, orange, and that they're mainly the things that lock a set to only interacting with its own cards. Because a lot of effects will be like, say, for in this case, Familia and stuff like that relates to Danmachi, and so there'll be cards that say all your Familia characters get 500 power, stuff like that. So characters, you have these ones here. We'll do this to that next. These are event cards. Look very similar to the characters, except they don't have an attack value. That's because these cards are one-time use. You pay the cost, you play them, the effect goes off, they go away. Some decks will not use these at all. Others, like this Danmachi deck, actually use quite a lot of them. So they're kind of interesting. And they represent usually either, in this case, equipment or somewhat like minor events from the anime. Nothing huge, but sometimes there'll be a kind of notable event covered in an event card. Then, to cover the bigger events, you have these sideways cards, which are called climax cards. Obviously to represent the climactic moments from that particular anime. And they're done sideways because they're meant to be a kind of set piece card. They have an effect. There's no cost to play these, and there's a specific part of the turn where you do play them. The effect usually is wide ranging in that it affects either a bunch of characters or the entire board, and they're also very notable for other gameplay mechanics as well. So that's the main kind of stuff about just the cards. In terms of like dimensions, these cards are the same size as Magic the Gathering cards and Pokemon cards. So notably that means they're going to be bigger than, for instance, a Yu-Gi-Oh card. So in terms of getting like extra stuff to help protect your cards, like card sleeves and stuff like that, you want card sleeves that will fit Pokemon, Magic, that sort of thing. Yu-Gi-Oh card sleeves will not fit this game. So just be aware of that if you're getting into especially the kind of collecting side of things ultimately. So now that you're sort of familiar with the way the cards kind of look and stuff like that, let's go through kind of products. So obviously we know Avatar is going to be getting a trial deck plus a booster pack and a supply set. I don't have a supply set, but the idea obviously that you get a deck box, some booster packs, and some promo cards. There's not too much to explain there. Trial decks are interesting because they basically should just be called starter decks. But the idea, for the most part, is just that, you know, trial, they're an example for how the kind of set operates. So here's an older Attack on Titan trial deck, not a trial deck plus. So this is when they were doing it in their sort of like old style, where certain cards you actually only got one copy of, so you had to buy 4 copies of it to get like a whole play set, which was a bit awkward. This is just a sleeved up Sword Art Online Alicization trial deck plus 1 copy of it. And what's interesting about this is that every card either comes in 2 or 4 copies, meaning you just get 2 trial decks, put them together, and you form basically this, you know, more advanced version of the cards from the trial deck. So a much more kind of thoughtful thing for the players here to just be able to do that. 2 trial decks versus 4. That's somewhat interesting. Otherwise, like I said earlier on in the video, the Trial Deck Plus is just built to be a little bit more representative of what an actual constructed deck is going to be like. Whereas these ones maybe were a little bit more basic, more like proper, you know, starter decks. Not super representative of what the game is like that much. Very interesting thing about Weiss Schwarz trial decks is what it says in the back here. There is a random Attack on Titan trial deck which contains one of 2 types of holo cards, or the sign card of Yuki Kaji, who is the voice of Eren Yeager in Attack on Titan. So that's the cool thing about Weiss Schwarz trial decks. There is a booster pack aspect to them. You can actually pull rare cards out of the trial deck. You're not getting an extra card. It is just that a common copy of one of the cards in the trial deck is sort of being replaced with a holo version of that same card. So it's the same mechanically, it's just you have a chance to get a little bit more value by opening certain trial decks. So some players do that, buy whole like boxes of trial decks to try and pull the stuff that's in it. So just to give you an example of how this works, because again, they will be doing something like this with the Avatar trial deck. We don't know the full scope of what they're going to do, mainly when it comes to those signed cards, which we'll get to talking about a little bit more later on. We don't know what they're going to do there, but there's going to be some rare holo cards in it. So this SAO trial deck plus will more represent what they do nowadays with this. So I didn't pull anything fancy from this, so this is just a normal trial deck plus. You get 2 holos in this set. These 2 cards come as a standard kind of holo. Technically, it's an SR or super rare. So it's just a sort of standard kind of hollow pattern. Nice, but nothing too fancy there. What you'd expect to get from a starter deck, basically. But then, there are specific cards that have the opportunity to come as other rarities. So, one of your copies of this card, Female Childhood Friend Alice, has a chance to be a SP, a signed copy of this card, which is nice hollow, it's alternate art, the character's a little bit off to the side to give space for the signature, and it looks really, really cool, and I'll show off as the SP a little later on. So you have a chance to get this card as an SP. Similarly, you get a chance for this card, Fate Beginning to Change Yu-Gi-Oh! He can also come as an SP. Then these three cards here, Lost Child of Vector Kirito, the Osmanthus Ninth Alice Synthesis 30, and this Climax card, Adventure of the Past. These three all have a chance to be a triple rare. And it's interesting the way they do that. I think the triple rare for this one is basically just a hollow version of this card. I don't think there's that much that's different. The Kirito has a chance to be like foil and alternate art, which is interesting. And then this one has a chance to be foil plus alternate art. It's the same card, it just has a different art from the same scene. So it still has the same like idea and kind of general look. So you have that kind of different levels of rarity kind of going on there, where you have the hollows you get normally, and then you have the triple rare is technically the lower rarity, so you have a chance to kind of get like one of these as a hollow / alternate art, which is interesting. And then if you could do really well, one of these two can come as a signed card, which, because they're like from trial decks, like the signed cards in trial decks actually sometimes are potentially the most valuable card from the entire set. So they could be worth hundreds potentially. So that is very interesting for Avatar, where I'm guessing the trial deck for Avatar is probably going to be either Aang and Katara focused or Aang and Zuko focused. So if they do have signed cards, it's going to be Aang, Katara and or Zuko, which is quite interesting. So that's cool by itself. It means that there's some value to a degree in terms of buying multiple copies of the trial deck. So when you have to buy two to get the play sets, that just increases your chance of getting a pull out of it. So that's good. Now, booster packs and boxes. So obviously your packs are going to ultimately come from a booster box. But the pack itself is somewhat interesting, a little bit different than kind of Western card packs, in that they have the kind of like ring thing for being put up on shelves, and then they do have the little tab here that you can just rip it open easily from the side, which is nice. There are 9 cards per pack, and there are certain guarantees in a way. Like every booster pack of a main set, you get for sure 1 rare, you for sure get 1 climax card, so you always get 1 sideways card, just to help with kind of playing the game, because you need them for your deck. And then you get a certain amount of commons, certain amount of uncommons, and if you get something rarer, it will always replace one of the uncommons. So you always get that rare, and it's an uncommon that gets replaced, is my understanding of it. So obviously there's more commons than uncommons in the packs, and that effectively is why they're different rarities, is just that you will, from a box, get way more commons than uncommons from opening up all your packs. So that's that. Booster boxes, which is ultimately, I think, how most people this is how you are going to be opening up your packs, just because it is much more effective to pull rare cards by just buying a complete box, for reasons I'll explain pretty much right now. So if we look at this on the back, it says this box contains 16 packs. So that's a little bit smaller than most booster boxes, which is for Western games is either 24 or 36 most of the time, sometimes 20. So 16 is a somewhat small amount, but not too small. And it says here, like for this set, which is a very standard set for Weiss Schwarz, Danmachi here, 100 types of cards plus 35 parallel types of cards. Now, the way to interpret that is that it means there are 100 like mechanically unique cards in this game. 100 different named cards. The 35 types that are parallel are not different cards. They are from the 100. It's just that 35 of those 100 happen to have fancier rarity alternate versions. That's the way to interpret this. And you can see it goes through all the different rarities there, that for the normal, so the 100 cards, there are climax commons, climax rares, common, uncommon, rare, double rare. And for the parallels, there are super rares, triple rares, and SPs. So that is that. The ratio, usually with a box, is that you are guaranteed to get in a box of a normal set at least 4 double rares. As I said, you get rares in every pack, so the only normal cards that you actually have to pull are the double rares. So you are guaranteed to get at least 4 of them. Some boxes will have 5, but here's the thing. Every box will have at least 1 parallel. So that's the thing. So what it means is that your options when you get a box are that you are either going to get 4 double rares and 1 parallel, 5 double rares and 1 parallel, or 4 double rares and 2 parallels. And then my understanding of it is that if you get the box that is 4 double rares and 2 parallels, that will always be, I think, like an SP and one of the other ones. I think. I don't know exactly how that works, but it does mean that you can sort of strategize it a little bit on like what way you actually want to do it. So that is good. The other thing about a booster box is that there is also a box topper card. So when you open up the box, on top of the packs is going to be 1 card sealed in plastic. For Danmachi, there are 4 different options for what that card is, meaning that technically there are 104 cards in the set. But, you know, usually they do it where like those cards, maybe only one of them is particularly maybe notable from like an effect point of view. So to briefly go through, I suppose, the look of these cards, let's just use an example of the Danmachi set and go through some of this stuff. So Climax Rare versus Climax Common is basically just the common uncommon situation. You are, from a box, you're going to pull more Climax Commons than rares. This is a Climax Rare, but it's not hollow or anything like that. So there's nothing really to say about that. Rares. Well, otherwise, like commons, uncommons, they're all just normal looking cards. Rares. In Danmachi, this is what the rare looks like. There is a hollow pattern to it. You can sort of see there's a little bit of a kind of fractal geometric pattern on the back, but it's not super shiny. You'd hesitate to maybe call it a full-on like foil. It just has like an effect in a way in the background. So that's the way the rares and double rares look in this game. And again, because they're all at the normal rarity, that's the way they think about it. So this card, for instance, is a double rare. And you can see that, again, it has that exact same pattern as the rare. It's just slightly more difficult to actually pull, ultimately. Then, when we're talking about super rares, in my box, I got 4 double rares, an SR, and an SP. So I did very well out of my box. So I'll use this as the example here, as we make some kind of interesting comparisons here. So we got this. So this card, Goddess's Judgment Hestia, is a rare. This card is Goddess's Judgment Hestia. Exact same card, exact same art, but the hollow pattern is, of course, different, as you can see. The SR here, this is an SR, is slightly more hollow. And if I take it out of the sleeve here, you can maybe see it a little bit better. It is a much more noticeable foiling effect. They change from the sort of fractal pattern in the background to having a little bit of a kind of like weird looking kind of maybe star effect. And then also, the card is a little bit textured if you feel it. Like there's a little bit of kind of like raised kind of sections going on. So it's quite nice kind of looking overall. But SRs are the kind of lowest of the parallel rarities. So if this is the only one you get in your box, you're probably a little bit disappointed. But it highlights that typically rares get rarity upgraded to super rares, SRs. So there's that. With the triple rares are the second highest rarity of the parallel rarities. what happens in most cases is that what they do is that they upgrade all of the climax cards to become triple rares. So this is a good example of that. These two cards are both the Heroic Shot. Exact same card, exact same effect, but different art, as you can see. So you sort of highlights that in this case, same art, just slightly different holo treatment. In this case, they're doing full-on alternate art and foiling effects. So doesn't matter if it's climax common or rare, this is the way they do it. Alternate art and pretty nice looking as well. So again, if we open this up, again, it has a slightly different effect. It kind of has that sort of like sunburst kind of effect going on where like it's got lines spreading out from the center of the card. So pretty nice. And again, it is textured as well. So pretty nice. And then the way they also do this is that this, I think, much better represents the scene from the show than this one. So this looks a little bit like you almost have to like squint to see exactly what's going on here. Very clear what's going on with this one. And then the highest rarity, like normal rarity, that where they don't do something like kind of funny or weird, is SP typically. And SP are either signed or stamped cards. They do stamps when they can't get the voice actor signatures. I did, and I was lucky, and I did manage to pull a SP. So this is what I got. I got City Savvy Maiden Seer SP. And the way they do these ones is that these are typically double rares. Rarity upgraded to be SPs. So very nice overall. You can see the gold foiling. I'll take it out of the card sleeve here. Gold foiling. It is the Japanese voice actress, which is nice. Of course, we're very interested to see if they'll do this for Avatar at all. And again, it also has what I describe as sort of being like a fingerprint pattern kind of throughout the whole thing. It kind of feels like there's like a fingerprint sort of texture that again is slightly raised. So very nice looking there as well. So you can see there's a clear distinction between the idea that the normal set is nice, but nothing kind of crazy. It's the parallels where they do the really nice kind of foiling effect stuff. And it doesn't just come from the booster packs, it does also come from the trial decks as well. So that's another interesting point to note in all of that. One thing I do want to just quickly show you is that going through the Danmachi set, I do have every card from the set ultimately, is the cards in terms of their looks. Some of them are screenshots from the show. Others are promo pieces of art, which you can see the sort of distinction here of just like this Lily looks super clean. This eyes, because of the lighting of that scene, looks a little washed out. But for the most part, the high rarity cards are pretty nice. But as you get into maybe the commons and some of the uncommons, they have some more cards that are a little bit more kind of, you know, washed out. They're maybe not the best screenshot from the show. They do things like some of the climax cards there. They save the better version of the climax card for the higher rarity version and stuff like that. So that is something to keep an eye out for, especially with like the Avatar set, given that Avatar is an older show from like 2005. Yes, we now have like a Blu-ray version that's higher quality, but how will those look on cards? Or will they just go for promo images for most of the cards in the set? That'll be interesting to see what they do. But the collectability is very high for this game. And I have a feeling that I think Avatar, from what I've heard, is being viewed well enough, I think, by most people that I think they'll treat this as being a little bit of a special property. And they might do something like have a special Avatar rarity, and they might go all out and do fancy stuff with it and make it more than just sort of the standard set. But we'll obviously have to wait and see. As for the whole idea of signed cards, because this is going to be a big thing if they do or don't have it, can they get the Avatar voice actors? That's the question. So in my mind, they're either going to do, I'm going to guess 7 or 8 main characters that would make sense to be the signed cards. They are, of course, Team Avatar. So Aang, Katara, Sokka, Toph, Zuko, Suki. There's your full team avatar. And then, to me, the other characters that you would potentially do would be Iroh and then Azula. There's your 8, I think, absolute main characters. The problem is that I actually think you would definitely have not too much of a problem getting most of them. I think Grey DeLisle for Azula, Iroh's voice actor, I don't think you would have a problem. They interact with the fandom. I can't see there being that many barriers in the way of that. Suki's voice actress has been involved in stuff somewhat recently as well. Jack DeSena is involved with the Dragon Prince now, but again, otherwise he's somewhat involved. I can't see him being a bit of much of a problem. Toph's voice actress and Zuko's voice actress, Michaela Murphy and Dante Basco, are quite heavily involved with the fandom. They go to conventions all the time. I don't see there being a problem there. The problem is, realistically, probably Katara and Aang. Mae Whitman for Katara, I can't remember the last time if she's been involved in stuff all that recently, but I'd say Aang is probably more of the problem because Zach Tyler Eisen isn't a voice actor anymore, and that's one of those things where, and also because he is the main character, it feels like if you're doing signed cards, you have to have a signed Aang. So if you can't get him, does that basically just determine it on its own? I'd be very interested to see what they do. Otherwise, they'll do stamps where it's basically going to look somewhat similar. It just won't have a signature. I'm guessing they'll probably do elemental symbols and then like maybe a quote or have the character's name and stuff like that. Sometimes they do like a serial number type thing stamped on it so that it's like, ooh, this is the number 46 of this card or something like that, which could be an option as well. We'll see what they go with it, but there's the kind of section on collectability. Now, next, let's get into how to play the game. Okay, so with this kind of brief how to play section, I'm pretty much just going to get sort of like straight into it. I'm not going to spend too much time explaining the rules without just showing it in practice. The game plays a little bit differently than other card games, but you should recognize some of what's going on here. There shouldn't be anything too crazy going on. So, the setup basically is like this. You 50 card decks. You can only have 8 climax cards in your deck. It is up to 8, but realistically, you play 8 every single time. Always 8 climax cards. Why would you not? They are so important, as we'll get into. Shuffle your decks, and then you draw 5 cards. Both players draw 5 cards. You do get a mulligan, I forget the exact name on it, but basically you get a chance to, right at the start of the game, decide like, okay, do I want to discard any of these cards and draw again? You obviously want level 0s because the way the game works is you go from level 0, 1, 2, 3. At the start of the game you can only play level 0s, so if you don't have any, you're not doing anything on your first turn. So no level 0s in hand here at all. We do have some of the kind of nice equipment and stuff like that here. So what I'll do is I'll just hold on to these 2 level 1s. We'll discard 3 and draw up to 3. And we do get some level 0s. So that's quite nice. And we'll do the same with the opponent. They have a level 2. They'll discard that. And otherwise they'll just also draw 1. So that's pretty even. Then you obviously do your usual thing of like, you know, decide, roll the dice, rock, paper, scissors, just decide who goes first. For the sake of this, we'll just have Danmachi here go first. This is going to be, is it wrong to try and pick what goes in the dungeon? In the black sleeves, in the green sleeves, we have Sword Art Online. And again, this is more of a properly constructed deck versus just a trial deck plus. So this deck should have the advantage, but we'll see how it goes. There's an element of luck to this game because of the trigger effects and how the climax cards actually play into the game. So this deck is going first, and then on your first turn what you do is you draw. So you go from 5 to 6 cards in hand. Then there's an interesting part of the game. You make the decision. Do you want to do this thing that's basically called like clocking yourself? The clock is how damage is dealt in this game. And effectively the idea is, do you want to do 1 damage to yourself to draw 2 more cards? The answer to that question is like, yes, unless you're in the very end game where you're a few damage away from losing the game. So straight away, absolutely, we want to do this. So we have 3 of this level 0 here, so we're just going to put that straight into the clock. And the clock is basically just kind of represented somewhere along your back row. I usually just put the cards upside down just so I know for sure that like it's part of the clock. But the idea is that 1 damage now done, and we draw 2 cards. So you can see straight away we go from starting off with 5 to having now 7 cards in hand. So you get to dig relatively deep into your deck just by default with the basic mechanics of the game. And then if you have cards to help you do that, you're going to get through your deck pretty quickly. And in that sense, you know, you go through your deck quite quick in this game. Then, basically, you're straight up into a main phase. You start playing cards to the field. The only restriction on your opening turn is that the player who goes first can only attack once. There are technically 3 opportunities to attack every turn because of the way the field is laid out, but on your first turn, you only get to attack once because your opponent has nothing on the field. That's just the kind of fairness of all of this. As for how the field actually looks, because I don't have the mat sort of properly laid out here, I'll just demonstrate it with the cards upside down. The field layout is basically like this. There are 3 zones in the front, 3 zones in the back. And this is the stage. This is where you put your character cards. You have the 3 zones, center stage, and the front stage, whatever way you want to call it, and then 2 zones in the back stage. You can only attack with characters from front stage positions. Characters in the back stage are more going to support the characters in the front stage, and they're basically protected also by being in the back stage. So that's the kind of general idea here. Other than that, the way to think about it is that the backstage cards will often have effects that are like cards in front of this card get the bonus. So the zones that are in front of this one are obviously middle and this one, but this is not considered as being like in front of this card. This one, these 2 are in front of it. It's just that sort of idea. So just be aware of that. There are 3 positions in the front, and just be aware of that. So on our first turn, there's not really much point running out a bunch of level 0s because we're basically just asking for them to get destroyed by our opponent. And since we can only attack once, we'll do just that. So level 0 to the center stage, middle of the center stage. It does have effects, but right now they don't go off because they require us to use the energy of this game, stock, which we don't have. So basically from there, we end up going past the climax stage because we didn't draw any climax cards, and we're not going to do that anyway in the first turn, and go straight into attacks. So declare an attack, you just turn your card sideways and go into attack. There are technically 3 types of ways to attack in this game, but because there's no opposition character, we can only do one of those type of attacks, and that is a direct attack here. So what that means is the power here of the card, the 500, doesn't matter. What does matter is the little symbol there for soul. This has 1, so we're doing 1 damage, but it's a direct attack, so it's 1 plus 1. We are going to do 2 damage here. But this is where the trigger icons come into play. Every time you attack, you flip a card from the top of your deck over and check if there's a trigger. So we flip, and the card that we flipped over does not have a trigger, so nothing happens, but it goes into stock. So you just basically put it face down over here. It's basically your energy. So when this card, for instance, says, 1, put the top card of your deck into the clock and return this card to your hand. That 1 is basically pay 1 stock, and there'll be cards that reference that. So again, we are doing 2 damage with this attack. Nothing extra from the trigger. How damage is dealt then is obviously you can clock yourself for the draw effect of the turn, but your opponent cards then flips cards. So 2 damage. So 1, 2. And you chunk the damage together. You don't do it one at a time. It's not like 1 into damage, 2 into damage. No, you do it as a group for reasons we'll explain a little later on. So nothing going on here. This is just straight up 2 damage to our opponent. And that's basically all we can do for our turn. So it goes to our opponent's turn. They drew a climax card into their hand. And then they get to choose, do they want to do the clock system of like, damage themselves to draw cards? Yes, they do. So 3 damage now for the opponent, draw 2, and they do get another level 0. And so this is the idea here of like, just to explain this a little bit more. 3 damage. When they get 7 damage, they will then go up to level 1. Technically what will happen is you choose one of those cards that represent the 7 damage to act as your level 1 marker. You are now on level 1 and can play level 1 cards, assuming they meet the color conditions. And then you start the 7 damage again. When you get 7 more damage, you go up to level 2. At level 2, when you take 7 more damage, you go up to level 3. And then at level 3, when you take 7 more damage, you lose the game. So basically, you lose the game when you get to level 4. Now, there are ways to heal off damage in this game. So it does effectively mean like, 28 damage to win overall, assuming it all sticks. So that's the idea here. So this is why you don't mind giving yourself 1 damage every turn for probably the first 4 or 5 turns of the game. When you're getting to late level 2, level 3, that's probably when you want to stop clocking yourself. Just because you run the risk late in the game of a lot of damage coming your way. So that's why early game we are very much limited to just using level 0s. So they have 3 level 0s here, and this is where they're going to start to do some attacks and stuff like that. So what we'll do here is we obviously have 2 500, 500, and 1 1000. We'll put the 1000 Alice in the middle to match up against the bell, and then we'll just put the 2 Yu-Gi-Ohs on the side here. This way, these 2 will be doing direct attacks, and then this one will be doing an attack against the bell, and the power is bigger, so it'll be a victory for Alice. So that's what's happening here. Now, do any of the effects go off when we put it on stage? No, this is an assist card that mainly works in the back row for later on, and it has an effect when a climax card happens. This guy has, when it's an opponent's turn, other character gets 1500. That's actually quite interesting. And it's got a brainstorm effect, but it requires stock, none of which they have just yet. So let's do the attacks here. We'll start, no climax card. We'll start with this one over here in this zone. So again, they are technically attacking nothing because this bell is in the middle zone. So this is a direct attack. So again, it is flip, no trigger. This goes into stock for this player here. And then they are doing 1 + 1 for the direct attack, 2 damage. So flip. The trigger on defense doesn't do anything. Flip, nothing. So that is just 2 damage, done perfectly fine. They'll do the other direct attack here on the other side. So again, flip, nothing. So they go 2. So you can see the idea here is if you attack 3 times a turn, you get 3 stock every turn. That means if you rely on stock a lot and you don't attack that many times a turn, you're missing out on having a lot of energy. So again, we're doing 2 damage here. So flip, flip. So here's a good example of like why we group it together. The climax card cancels all this damage. It doesn't matter that this was flipped first. This coming second cancels all the damage. And now say we had to flip 3 cards. This would also cancel any damage after that. This full-on cancels the attack, basically, is sort of like the way you kind of treat it. So these 2 don't go into the clock, they go into the waiting room. That's the value of the climax cards, is mostly on defense, but also on offense, and then when you use them for their effect. That's why you always play 8, because the ratio of basically in your deck, climax cards to non-climax cards is actually like an important thing to keep track of. Knowing how many cancels you have left in your deck can kind of tell you, do I have to win on this turn? Like if it goes back to my turn and I have no climaxes in my deck, I'm done. That's sort of an idea. So that's that. And then the final attack here. Now, this is where that you have the choice between the other two types of attack. Alice here can't do a direct attack because there's a character in the way, but they can do the other two types of attack. So they are frontal attack, which is where Alice directly attacks Belle, attempting to destroy Belle. The other one is a side attack, where she attempts to attack around Belle. The way the side attack works is basically that you don't compare damage, but you basically do, okay, the soul calculated is it's 1 on this card, but then it's minus the level of the character you're going around. So it's fine at level 0, because obviously 1 minus 0 is still 1. But the second you get into the higher levels, side attacks become not super necessary or used. You're taking a risk in a way to do side attacks, because you're potentially doing a level 1 versus a level 3, and you go into the attack with like -2, hoping to get some amazing triggers. So the idea here is, well, do we side attack for 1 and ignore this card, or do we just direct attack for 1 and destroy the card? The value is very, very clear. You go for the kill here, frontal attack, because you still do the damage. That's the interesting thing about this game. You would think, in a way, that if you go for the character kill, you don't actually do damage to your opponent, but no. Every attack is going to do damage unless your side attack gets negated because of the minuses. So what happens here is, again, we flip, no trigger, goes into stock. This is where you compare the damage. So 1000 is higher than 500. Belle gets kind of stood upside down here to show that basically he's going to be defeated. The order of these operations is a little bit like, I think there's a specific order to it, but most of the time it works out. So we're doing 1 damage here, so flip, but straight away it's another cancel. Now that might have seemed good, but it's also kind of not great, because DanMachi would prefer to get to level 1 quite quickly. So cancelling a minor 1 damage is not actually that great. The cancel still means Belle is going to, be discarded basically at the end of the turn, but there's still a chance. The idea here is, once the card is upside down like this, after the attack is sort of like done, there's this thing called the encore step, where the player whose card has just been like defeated gets the chance to basically decide, do they want their character to have an encore? And if they pay 3 stock, they can basically just put their character back to this. The character's back. You can save them from going to the waiting room, the discard pile, by paying 3 stock. In this case, we don't have that, but I wouldn't have paid it anyway. So Belle goes to the waiting room, and that ends all of their attacks. So you can see 2 of them were cancelled, 3 damage is all that's done. So it's even though 3 attacks came in versus only 1. So that's a kind of interesting kind of point in all of this. So I'll just continue on for a little bit more, just to explain a few more of the kind of mechanics as we go through. So again, we draw for turn, we clock ourselves, so we do 1 damage to ourselves to draw 2 cards. And you can see your hand's getting quite large here. A lot of level 1s for when we eventually get there. The problem with DanMachi is that the level 0 lineup helps to build up to get your level 1s and 2s in hand, but is not amazing on its own necessarily. So what we'll do here is we'll just go Aina in the center, because she has an effect that can basically effectively get rid of cards that have a higher attack than her, which I'll explain in a second. We'll put the Hestia here, and we'll put the Belle over here. And otherwise we can't actually play the rest of them because everything else is level 1. So effects go off. Belle does have an effect, but one of his effects is basically at the beginning of our opponent's attack phase. We can do that. And then the other effect requires us to be level 2, which we are not yet, so that's fine. The Hestia has 2 effects. One of which is basically, choose one of your opponent's cards, and it can't move to a different position on stage next turn, until the end of your opponent's next turn. This is to prevent the idea of like your opponent gets to their next turn and just decides like, okay, some of my characters survived, I'll just move Alice to the back row, put a different card up here. You can actually lock Alice in the front row if you want, and kind of restrict them in that way. So that's quite interesting. But the other effect that she has happens when she's placed on the stage. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck, choose one event from among them, reveal it to your opponent, put it into your hand, and the rest into your waiting room. If you put a card into your hand, put a card from your hand into the waiting room. So you get to look at the top 3. If there's an event, put it into your hand. If there's not, they go into the waiting room. So no event there. But in this game, especially for this deck, it is good to put cards into the waiting room. Because notice it's called the waiting room and not the discard pile. Very much highlighting the idea that a lot of effects are going to get the characters from the waiting room back onto the board. That's the way to treat it. That it's just another... It's basically another way to get the cards just out of your deck. Because you can just look through your waiting room and reorganize it and count the number of cards that there are. It's an important thing to keep track of during the game. Now, Aina here does have an effect. So, pay 1 stock and put a card from your hand into your waiting room. When it's placed on stage from hand, pay the cost. If you do, search your deck for basically a Danmachi card and put it, reveal it to your opponent and put it into your hand. We are going to do that. So we'll pay the stock. We have to put a card from our hand into the waiting room. So I'll put Firebolt into the waiting room, and then we get to basically search our deck for it's specifically a Familia, Guild, or Hostess of Fertility character. So it has to be a character. So we can either set up, get more of our level 1s, which we probably want to do. Level 0s aren't great. I'm going to get this Wealth for next time out. And we shuffle our deck, of course. So, then we don't have a climax card to play, I believe. No, we don't. And we go into attacks. So, this is where I'll demonstrate with the Aina, because she has an interesting effect. Her other effect is when this card becomes reversed, basically, in battle, when she loses a battle, if this card's battle opponent is level 0 or lower, you may put that character at the bottom of your opponent's deck. So it's a good way to just eliminate other level 0s. So she doesn't have the power to technically do it. Now we could just side attack if we wanted to, but in this case it's actually a good idea to do the frontal attack. So we'll do Aina frontal attack. So we flip. We actually flip on attack a climax card. So this is where the 2 icons actually do activate. So this has 2 icons. One, the white symbol, just is the soul symbol. So that means +1 soul. So this attack is going to be for 2. It's a frontal attack, so it's 1 + 1 for this. And then the other symbol, you do kind of need to look in the rule book to get the specific things here. But this one is the gate symbol. You may choose a climax card in your waiting room and return it to your hand. Very nice. So we do have that. We have a climax. We have multiple climax cards, don't we? Yeah. So that's going to be a good setup here for next time out. Unyielding Feelings goes to hand. And then we are doing the damage. So what happens here is, of course, Aina is weaker than Alice. So Aina actually gets reversed. But her effect puts Alice on the bottom of the deck. So it just immediately eliminates it from the board onto the bottom of the deck. And then the damage. So 2. Flip. Flip. That is 2 more damage. So they have 5 damage now. And then, of course, the idea is we can't encore Aina. Sorry, this goes as stock. So we can't encore Aina. She goes away. And then we do our other attacks here. And usually, you know, it's up to you, like, what way you want to do this and so on. Do you want to side attack, keep those characters on board or not? For the most part, I think it's probably just the best to just straight up do the 2 frontal attacks in this case. So we flip, that goes into stock. It's just an attack for 1. In this case, actually, it's 500 versus 500. Both are going to get reversed, which I think is actually sort of okay. So both of these will get reversed because they both have the same. They flip for 1. That is 6 damage. They don't want to encore. We don't want to encore. So these 2 go away. And then, oops, sorry, I put this card over here. This one goes away. And then here, Hestia attacks. This is an actual victory, so that will get reversed. We flip, that goes into stock, and it's going to be 1 damage. So flip, 1 damage, and now here you can see in their clock is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That means it is time for them to level up. So this is the important rule when it comes to like the colors, basically. The only limitation in this game on colors is basically level 0, you can play anything, it doesn't matter. But when you get to level 1, 2, and 3, to play level 1, 2, and 3s, you have to have a card of that color either as the level marker anywhere in your level or in your clock. So what it does mean here, they're going to go from having suddenly 7 cards in their clock to having only 1 card to represent their level. So they effectively like have to look at their hand and decide like, okay, my level 1s that I have here are blue, blue, and this is level 3. So they basically have to make the decision here. They have to choose a blue card from here to represent their level. So they'll use this blue Kirito to be their level. So they are now on level 1 and have access to blue cards. Now, the second they take a piece of damage, like just say for instance, they took another damage and it's a yellow card, they now can access their whole deck just with those 2 cards. They're on level 1 and there's a blue and a yellow card in their damage area effectively. That's it. They're effectively the color restrictions of the game. It does mean you can get yourself into awkward situations if you happen to play a deck that's like every color. So you're blue, yellow, red, and green. That can be a little bit to keep track of. But for 2 color decks, which most decks are, nothing too crazy to talk about. So the other 6 damage then goes into the waiting room. And that is basically the turn. So the turn ends here. They go, they draw. And this is the thing with the leveling as well, is they just went up to level 1. They're maybe worried about the level 1s with yellow. They can just choose to clock themselves by using a yellow card, which they will straight away do. Draw 2. And they still now have access to everything. So there's that kind of simple aspect as well. And then we're pretty much level 1 is the only point at which you have to worry. Because once you get to level 2, you can just choose the opposite color to be the level 2 marker. And then you have both colors. So it's a pretty minor thing, the restriction of colors in the game, for the most part. But they're on level 1 now, so they can play level 1s and 2s. So that's what they are going to do. This goes away, of course, from the previous turn. But now they can play this. So they have Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Goes onto the field. They'll play Alice back here. They'll play this Yu-Gi-Oh! Up front. And no effect. This effect can't activate right now. Or do they want to activate it? Not just yet. But they do have a card in the back row now. So no effects are actually going to go off here. So then, right before the attack phase is the climax phase. That's when you play your climax card. There's technically a zone on the board, but roughly you put it like here, just beside the sort of back row characters, just to demonstrate it's part of the overall stage now, is this card. And when you activate this, the only thing that matters is what the card says. So all of your characters get 1,000 power and 1 soul. So that means 1, 1, 1. Everything is now 2, 2, 2. And it's 6,000, 6,500, 6,000. The numbers don't really matter because they're only going up against a 1,500 character. But, you know, you can see the idea here. And this is going to be a little bit of a power play that should get things back on track. So just to kind of play this out a little bit, we'll see how this goes. So they again trigger for turn. Nope. And they are doing 2 plus 1 for the direct attack. So 3. 1, 2, 3. Cancelled. So there's another cancel there. There's the 3 example of like why you do it as a group. This was the third card, but it cancels everything before it. So that attack, nothing going. Next, the middle Yu-Gi-Oh will attack. Soul. So that means this Yu-Gi-Oh is actually attacking for 1, plus the climax is 2. It's a direct attack, so that's 3. And a trigger, so that's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That damage actually goes through. Now this is a good example, because this deck has 4 already in the clock. How do you actually go about doing this? The idea here is that, okay, well, this was the last card we flipped. So you put this aside, you put the first 3 on, so there's your 7 damage. We obviously have to make the choice here. In the Danmachi deck, the basic idea is there's 2 things you have to consider here. Because of the way this card operates, and also how... Yeah, it's basically just for this card. You want to put high-level cards into your level to get the level of your level up, basically. So we're going to use a red card, because that's what most of the restriction in this deck is, and we're going to choose a high-level red card. So we're going to put Argonaut Bell into the stock, into the level, sorry. The other ones then go to the waiting room, of course, and then we have our 1 damage left over, which does still go through. So level 1, 1 damage. So that's the way that works. Next, this will be a frontal attack. So it's 2 attacking. It is going to be a victory for Yu-Gi-Oh, of course. We flip, and here's an interesting one here. We flipped a climax on attack again, 2 different symbols. Now, obviously, we know that one does 1 damage, 1 extra damage. The whirlwind little thing here means you can basically blow one of your opponent's cards back to their hand. In this case, you actually don't want to do that, because this is going off the field. But if you put this back to your hand, you're giving your opponent the opportunity to put this card back onto the field and get the effect again, because this is like literally a search on play card. You don't want to do that. So you just be like, okay, I won't trigger that. But if we got that earlier, it might have been useful to have 3 direct attacks. But because we're already attacking here, you can see the idea. So this is 1, 2, 3 damage coming through. This goes into stock. 3 damage. 1, 2, 3. So that was a pretty good turn there. And then this goes away. And you can see we go back and forth from there. Their turn comes to an end. The climax card goes away. And we will go back and forth. The next turn, of course, is going to be a bit of a, I suppose, a power play for the Danmachi deck. Just because it's finally on level 1. And the setup is pretty amazing. So I think this is probably going to be the last turn I'll play here, just to demonstrate that this deck, for the most part, hasn't really been activating effects for the most part. So here's going to be a bunch of effects actually going off for this turn. So I don't think I drew. So we draw for turn. We will clock again. So what are we going to do here? Yeah, I'll put the level 2 bell in here, and we'll draw 2. So you can see here, we got a lot of cards to deal with here. We are going to play the climax card, so we'll just put that down here just to keep it out of the way. We are going to use it. Yeah, this Wealth. We'll put the Wealth here in the back row, because that's the best use for this card, just to keep it on the board. It has an effect that will lower the cost of the Pyonkichi event in the deck, and has an effect that can help us search as well. And then we can just start to do a bunch of stuff here. We'll put this Hestia in the back row as well. Again, its effect will just say sort of like this Yu-Gi-Oh on the side can't move, but I don't really care too much about that effect. What we will do is use the other effects. Top 3 cards, we can choose an event, put it into our hand. If not, everything goes to the waiting room. That's fine. We'll then put our level 1 bell on the field here. We'll put 1 in the middle as well. Then we'll play a Hestia Knife. Again, all of these are 0 cost now that we're on level 1. And Hestia Knife basically says, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and we can put a character into our hand. Rest go to the waiting room. So the amount of like milling we're doing here is like pretty intense overall. So we'll get the Argonaut Bell to hand. And again, we have another Hestia Knife if we want to do that as well. I'll play it now just to show you what a deck refresh looks like, because we're basically running out of cards here. Or actually, this is where the tactics come into play of like, these two cards actually depend on you having a quite large waiting room, so it would actually be a mistake to do that right now. Because the effect of this card is that when this card attacks, it gains X power until end of turn. X is equal to the number of fire bolts in your waiting room times 1,500. So if we refresh and our waiting room becomes our deck, suddenly we have nothing in the waiting room. Whereas right now, we have one firebolt. I know for sure there was definitely one other one. And I think do we actually have all four in the waiting room? Yeah, we do, yeah. So yeah, all four firebolts are in the waiting room, as you can see here. That means that this level 1 bell gets 6,000 extra power, meaning it's 10,500. For a level 1, that's incredible. And that's the whole point of like why this is sort of like the all-star card of this deck. Of on attacks, this is getting rid of basically everything, even well into like level 2. And it's even pretty good on level 3. So it's a very, very powerful card. And then this is the one with the Climax combo with this Climax card. So we're going to get 2 big searches as well when we activate that. So that is pretty notable as well. But I think the way that that's going to work is that will probably do the deck refresh for us anyway. So I think actually we probably do want to play Hestia Knife now, just to get going. So what happens here is basically we have to look at the top 4 cards of our deck, but we only have top 3. So top 3, then we have to shuffle our waiting room. I won't do a massive shuffle here. And then immediately what happens here? Our deck is shuffled, we take 1 damage. We take a damage for a deck refresh. Top card just goes straight into there, so we're on 6 there. So now, game basically resumes now that we've done that kind of action. 4th card for Hestia Knife, and we can start to kind of set up our hand a little bit. So look, there's the other level 1 bell, so we can put that onto the field now. Otherwise the other 3 cards go to the waiting room. So yeah, we'll put bell on the board. So we have the 3 boys up front ready to go, but the waiting room is not in a great position at the moment. But what we will do is we'll actually, this is an interesting thing that you can do. We'll play this level 0 Hestia from hand and just discard this one off the field. You can just do that, straight up replacement, because you're going down a card, so it's something that's reasonable to do. Probably should have done it before, but I think it's fine ultimately what we've done now. Then we'll activate its second effect, which is pay 1 and rest it basically. Pay 1 stock, rest it. Flip the top 4 cards of the deck over. For every Climax card revealed, we can wait, for each Climax card, search it. Yeah, basically a character for every Climax. So, but we got no cards there, so we just put it in the waiting room. But what it has done is what seemed like a disaster for our big attack has meant we suddenly have a quite healthy waiting room once again, including 1 firebolt. So the bells, they're a little bit down on power from where they were before, but they're still 6,000 across the board. And as we'll see now, just before attacks, we'll play our Climax card, Unyielding Feelings, which is plus 1,000 power plus 1 soul. All these effects go off. They all have the same Climax combo with Unyielding Feelings, which is if this card is in your center stage, which doesn't just mean this position, it means the entire front row. It's backstage and center stage. You can choose one of the following effects. I can either choose a Hestia Knife in my waiting room and put it to my hand, or search my deck for a Hestia Knife and put it into my hand. So we can look here to see what the Hestia Knife situation is. So there's 1 in the waiting room. Okay, so that's fine. So we'll do that. We'll get the 1 in the waiting room to our hand. That's 1 effect then. And then we'll search the deck for hopefully the other 2. Because there's 1 here, there's 1 in the clock. I forget what the cards we flipped over there were, but there should be at least one in the deck. So there's one, and is there a second one? Yes, there is. So those effects go off, and all of a sudden we have 3 Hestian Eyes. And I believe we used 2 Hestian Eyes this turn as well. So the idea here is that we can just keep going now. Like, how many cards have we played this turn? And we can actually keep going if we want the power level of the bells to be higher again. So another Hestian Knife. We look at the top 4, get a character to hand, and the rest go to the waiting room. And look, another Firebolt goes into the waiting room. These bells get more powerful again. We could continue to do that, but the idea here is that ultimately 5,500 is the highest power on the other side of the board, and we don't want to blitz through our deck again that quickly, just so these guys are on like 10,000. The other thing to realize is that we'd get them on 10,500 but be so low in the deck they'd immediately go down again. So we actually want them to stay on a high number for a while. So there is a sense of you have to keep track of quite a few things with the Danmachi deck, kind of showing you the difference between, like, the first few turns for this deck have been very, very simple because it's not constructed. It does have like a Brainstormer like the Hestia, but that's about it. Whereas every level 0 in this deck is doing some sort of searching effect or has another effect, whereas this deck actually has like level 1s that are just like vanilla. So it kind of does highlight that the best decks are going to have like every card has an effect going on, and so on. But so you can see the idea about what's going to happen here. We're going to basically do 3 attacks. We're going to reverse all of their whole line of level 1s, which is quite notable. Like, just absolutely obliterate them because the power is so much higher, plus there's this. We're doing at least 6 damage across the board here, potentially more if the flips go our way, but also depends on what they cancel or don't cancel. And so you can sort of see the way that this is actually going to go, of like 1 for this attack, so that's going to be like, what, 2 damage, 1, 2, that's for this attack. This one, let's see, another damage, so that's going to be 3 this time out. So 1, 2 cancelled, so that one gets cancelled. The last one will be flip, and this will be for 2. 1, 2, 2 damage, and so it wasn't as like bombastic of a turn as you maybe would expect, but it's basically again equalized slightly. But you know, it's the setup on this side of the board was like really strong. The only weakness with this is the way that this effect works with the power is that when it attacks, this card gets that much power. Otherwise, it's just 4,500. But the idea here is that they have 6 stock, probably would use 3 of this to save, for instance, like one of these. They probably wouldn't use all of it just to save 2 cards, but they do this to save this guy, and you know, on their turn start to go. Because the one problem with this deck is that they don't have an amazing ability to like keep their hand going. They're very much relying on like clocking to keep going, in that they have to try and defeat this board with like these cards, and they only have really this to kind of do something with. Now, thankfully, they do have this card, and this has an effect that it is a bond with the card Memories that shouldn't exist, Yu-Gi-Oh, which is this card, and it basically, what is it? You pay a stock. Oh no, it only works when it's played on stage, actually, yeah, so that wouldn't actually work right now. But if we kept that in hand, that might have been able to activate, get this on board, and you can see that there's some combos in this deck, even if it's rather basic. And that's basically the way that this is going to go. Obviously, once this deck gets to level 2, you'll start to bring this card, Argonaut Bell, into play, which is quite powerful, because it basically goes from 4,000 to being a consistent 11,000 character on the stage. And then once you're at the level 3s and stuff like that, that's where it starts to get quite big. Of like, you have cards that just have 10,000 going at each other, and also 2 soul cards start to come into play. So with a climax on field, everything's doing like 3 damage. and the game accelerates basically after once you get to that level 3. It's going to end very, very soon. So you definitely stop clocking and doing damage to yourself at that point, and you know, you go from there. So that is effectively the core of how you play the game. I don't really think there's that much else to talk about in terms of, like, that's in general how a lot of the effects and abilities are going to work. Like I was saying, you can move cards around. So let's just say, for instance, it's this deck's turn. It's this deck's turn. It's like this. You can just be like, okay, during my main phase, I'll do this. I'll actually swap this around as well. Actually, I like it this way. And then be like, okay, I'll replace this with this. Like, you do have that ability to move the cards around on your turn like that to set the stage the way you want. If you want to play a little bit more defensive, you can move an attacker to the back row for a bit, deal with the threat, and come back if you want to. That's there. There is another section of the board called the memory. The memory is basically like the banished zone in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's basically like another waiting room type thing. It's just not as many cards interact with it, is the way to kind of interpret that. There are, I think, in this set, the Danmachi set, I think some of the Aina cards relate to memory, but it's not that, you know, prevalent. Other sets, they might use it much more heavily, and that's the basic idea there. So that's kind of the way that it goes. The key in terms of this game is sort of getting those climax combos going and using them to your advantage to get massive advantage. So Unyielding Feelings plus this spell gets you a lot of cards. If you do manage to pull off the Argonaut Bell Heroic Shock combo, you get a major payoff where this card basically can attack twice, which is pretty notable. There's also a Hestia combo with the blue climax in this deck. That's pretty noticeable. It's a real finisher card, this one, which is where, like, this deck maybe kind of stumbles a little bit, where, like, its level 3s are not the, like, absolute strongest cards, but, you know, trial deck, more constructed deck. So I like this game, and I'm so excited to build Avatar decks. Really, really excited to build Avatar decks. So I think that's basically it for the whole video there. So if you do have any questions about Weiss Schwarz or anything like that, definitely let me know below, because I probably will be doing a decent amount of coverage once more information about the Avatar Weiss Schwarz set begins to come out, and I probably will be getting quite a bit of sealed product for it as well. So expect to see openings and stuff like that when it actually comes out. Otherwise, like I said, let me know if you want to know anything more about the game. Otherwise, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.